Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with my good friend and fellow board member with the Receivables Management Association International, Miss Amber Russo, who is with Kino Financial. How you doing today, Amber?
Good. How are you?
Another day in paradise. And for anybody who's not familiar with you, and I'm sure that most people have met you at either an NCBA conference, RMAI, or another conference, but can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. Post-college, my background is working for creditors' rights law firms. And then I had the opportunity to begin working on the debt buying side about 10 years ago. And Kino Financial was formed with my partners about 5 years ago. So I am president of that regional debt buying company. We are based out of Arizona. And we're in about 7 states right now, actively purchasing in about 7 states. But I stay busy now serving as a board member for RMAI. And managing our portfolios.
Absolutely. So clearly you've got a lot of experience in the receivables management space. I know you and I have been working together for a number of years, but it sounds like you guys got a lot going on in Arizona right now as it relates to a ballot initiative. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit, but just to kind of set the stage a little bit, could you tell everybody what a ballot initiative is?
Sure. So a ballot initiative is created to give, voters the opportunity to, make statute amendments themselves, right? So you are required to have a number of signatures based on, your population to get something on the ballot. And voter initiatives that produce statute amendments are available in about 18 states. 26 states have the opportunity to do some sort of law changing by initiative, but 18 allow this sort of statute amendment opportunity, right? And so we are dealing with it, I think, for the first time from an industry standpoint, where it has been an amendment on the statutes that govern what we do. Well,
before we go too deep into the actual ballot initiative that you're dealing with right now in Arizona, so if I'm understanding correctly, a ballot initiative is an opportunity based on a volume of signatures for citizens to get something on the ballot for a vote that can change an overall statute that may have already been put in place by legislators. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. And so right now you guys have like this really unique problem, right, in Arizona. So for the first time using this new, let's call it legal mechanism, you're now facing a challenge to the state of Arizona. So what specifically is being challenged right now?
So the amendment to our collection statutes would change the minimum wage requirements for wage garnishment.
Okay.
It would change the exemption in bank levies. And it would also change the homestead exemptions by almost doubling them.
Wow. Okay. So through this ballot initiative, should it go through, it's basically going to create significant restrictions on your ability to execute a judgment within the confines of Arizona.
It would almost completely cripple collection recovery in Arizona, because essentially a consumer making under $51,000 is exempt. They're untouchable.
Just completely exempt. So anybody who's earning less than $50,000, which is a pretty reasonable and livable wage, they would then become totally exempt. And any idea which organizations are kind of pushing for this ballot initiative?
Yeah, I'll get to kind of the backup, but I was going to say that's actually Arizona's median income. So,
okay.
So you're really taking kind of that whole segment of consumers, which again, as we chat about this, my real stance on the financial ecosystem, right, is that it takes lending opportunities away from that consumer pool. Because if there's no recovery, it's really going to put a limitation on their access to money.
Well, lending is a balance, right? It's a risk versus reward probability. And if the risk is increased because we're unable to collect and people know that we're unable to collect, then why would you start to lend? It's the same thing that we're seeing all over the news now when you have jurisdictions that are saying we're not going to prosecute shoplifting anymore. And people are just walking into stores, piling stuff out and walking out in front of everybody. Right. And why would the consumer not do the same thing from a financial services perspective, given the opportunity?
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about kind of what's behind this. And the real frustration here for folks in my seat is that it was really sort of a bait and switch situation. It was put out by a company called Healthcare Rising. They put it out kind of and said that this is a healthcare, a medical debt issue. And so now they're standing outside of grocery stores, asking folks like, don't you want to sign to protect you and your neighbors from predatory medical collections? It's really deceiving because the statute amendment would attack all collection opportunities, but doesn't even limit it to state collections, right? Like everybody. And the only small reference to medical debt is a cap on post-judgment interest for medical debt, which again is pretty insignificant considering that most of the hospitals in Arizona don't even pursue legal remedies. So again, it was really just to kind of title their initiative with something that was catchy. The money behind it. So let's talk a little bit about any voter initiative is going to need to have funding, some big money backing, because I could go out and try and get the required number of signatures. I'll never be able to do that on my own. I have to hire companies to do that. So while it is, from the people, it really has to have some sort of, big dollar backer. Right.
Sure.
In this case, it's actually a California union called SEIU. And, our consultants, and when I say I'm as a Arizona-based debt buyer, I'm working closely with the Arizona Creditors Bar Association. We have formed sort of a opposition working group. And so our consultants that we went out and hired as soon as we saw that there was some $1 million backings coming our way, they said, look, you're probably a byproduct of what really the goal was to mobilize, voters and, in a non-election year, and, unionize hospitals and things like that. It really probably wasn't meant to come after the entire financial ecosystem in Arizona, but it stands to have that impact.
Seems like a pretty large byproduct, right? And with language like that and not being focused on medical, I could understand that point of view, but it appears to be a little bit more pointed than that.
Yeah, so that is who is behind it. They did put in almost $4 million to fund their, collection of the required collection of signatures. They've hired national petition gathering companies to do that work. And on the other side of it, we mobilize some consulting groups that sort of do this all the time. It's not the first time that another, some organization has not tried to put something on the ballot that would change, our landscape, right? But it is the first time that it's focused on debt collection.
Sure. And that's interesting. I guess, when we talk about these ballot initiatives, what makes it different to kind of fight against a ballot initiative or to battle a ballot initiative as opposed to, legislation. Like, I would assume that from a legislative perspective, like, you can engage with the parties that are involved, like you can have a discussion, but it sounds like this is a little bit different.
Right. So think about that, right? How many times have we seen a bill put up and we as an industry can go to the consumer advocate groups and we can sort of negotiate a middle ground?
Mhm.
As you know, right? Like, we're not in the business of taking someone's last dollar, right? And
Sure.
sometimes there is this discussion of, where's that middle ground? What allows lending and collection to continue, but then also protects consumers. And we saw a lot of that during COVID. There was a lot of, proposed bills and consumer rights advocates and things like that, that we were able to go to the table with. And I think
Sure.
that we see that, and in all cases, we're prepared to do that, right? The ballot initiative is different because there's no challenge to it. Really what will happen at this point is, should the required number of signatures be submitted by their July deadline, it will then go to the recorder's office to validate a certain number of signatures. They have to make sure that folks that are signing are registered voters and things like that. But likely they will submit enough to presumably get on the ballot. We, at that point, have the opportunity to challenge their signatures. That can be a very costly process. You're looking at somewhere about $900,000 for that phase of this opposition plan.
Okay.
You have to look at things like, that person doesn't live at that address anymore. They signed
Detailed
it twice.
Data management and
Look,
comparison.
they signed outside of this grocery store, but then also this grocery store, they can't count twice.
Sure. But that's your battle plan there at that point, is to be battling signatures, not necessarily negotiating a middle ground or a reasonable outcome to where the industry may also participate. Like, when you talk about like a lot of the COVID bills that came out, I think the industry did a good job of working with the groups, because we were already taking a lot of the actions independently and without requirement to assist consumers through the COVID process, right? And because everybody was still living in this, unknown world, so to speak. But in this case,
yeah, I mean, look, I'll tell you, in Arizona, when they said, "Oh, we're going to protect stimulus payments," it was like, well, that's great. We're already doing that. We're on board.
We've been doing that for 6 months now, but okay,
right? Like, sure. We're on board with you. Yeah, having no problem. And so this is different, because let's say the signature challenge phase doesn't happen. We're unable to fundraise for that. It will be on the ballot for voting. It'll be so on the November ballot, assuming that SEIU does some more advertising, right? Hey, vote against predatory medical collections. Folks will vote. And once that amendment is put in, you really are unable to challenge it. You can only, according to our consultants, really challenge the validity of it if it was a constitution issue, or if you were going to further the cause of the initiative, in which case I don't really have an argument for that, right? Sure. So it really leaves you dead in the water. So again, that's how it is different, because it really leaves us with very little options and very little opportunity to educate, right? So the education is, hey guys, you are making it so that folks in this income bracket will have a very difficult time getting auto loans. You are making it so that folks outside of that income bracket are going to have to pay higher interest rates. And
it's a much more complex argument, right? Like, trying to educate people on a grand scale like that is a much more complex argument and is a little bit more difficult to do. So I guess let me ask you the $900,000 question, as it would. How can the industry help? How can those of us in the industry assist with what you're working on today for this ballot initiative?
So what we've done these last 2 months or so is we have, with the support of the industry and with the support of organizations like RMAI, we have been able to hire consultants to help us through this process. And we have just recently released a media campaign educating folks, or at least trying to mobilize folks into not voting, or I'm sorry, not signing this ballot initiative as folks are coming up to them outside of the grocery store. So the website is declinetosignaz.com. There you can see the ad, and you can see sort of the bullet points of what this initiative does. So go to declinetosignaz.com and learn more about the details of the voter initiative. But on, right now, what we're asking folks to do is help us mobilize big business. Look, we are definitely out to raise to continue to pay for our media campaign, and we'll put up a billboard should we be given the opportunity, right? Like, all of it is expensive, but more than that, I need to mobilize bankers associations and Republican Party groups. People need to understand what this is doing to the industry and to the financial services world.
Well, it sounds like this will have an effect on the entire credit ecosystem should it go forward, and to mobilize everybody within that credit ecosystem that, already has that education as to the negative effects of this, right? Because there are plenty of negative effects in terms of the availability of credit and other things, should this go forward. So I think that's really important, and appreciate all of the hard work that you're putting into creating this defense of really a new opportunity to kind of attack the industry. And it is, it's a different version of kind of the same things that we've seen in other places, but much more difficult to negotiate when there's no one on the other side of the table. When it's a mechanism that you're fighting, or a movement, versus actually being able to discuss reasonably with individuals and educate and provide that kind of advocacy backbone that's necessary for industry defense. But, really appreciate you, in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting, right? I mean, we just recently set up our PAC. So we have a political education fund. So that is Protect Our Arizona. We are just a group of, we didn't see ourselves here if you would have asked us 6 months ago, right? But you do. So our political education at this point is really helping folks to understand that this initiative doesn't do what it purports to do. And I think that, if successful, it certainly has the propensity to spread, right? As a mechanism to challenge our industry and to cause problems for folks that do the work that we do.
Absolutely. Well, for those of you that are watching, if you have any additional questions for Amber, her contact information will be below, as well as a link to the website that she's discussing, declinetosignaz.com. We'll provide some links there as well. Amber, I really appreciate you coming on and having this discussion with me. I think this is an important initiative that that the industry needs to be aware of, and I hope that we can spread some awareness through this video. Any final words that you'd like to add?
No, thank you for letting me go on about it. There's a handful of us, right, that would be willing to talk about this all day, at least till November, right? We're hoping it doesn't get to that point. But thank you for having me. And yes, anybody with any questions, or if you want information on how you can help, please get in touch with me.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching today. Amber's contact information is below. And until the next conference, Amber, I'll see you again soon.
Bye. Thank you.